Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so today we're unpacking a really moving, deeply personal sermon delivered by Reverend Les. We're going to dive into how we navigate uncertainty, major life transitions, and, that really beautiful, bittersweet feeling of saying goodbye. It's an incredibly human journey about standing at a crossroads, and it's full of lessons that I think will totally resonate with anyone who has ever felt just a little bit lost.
So ask yourself, how do you actually make a massive, life-changing decision? Reverend Les doesn't kick off his sermon with some lofty theological concept. Actually, scratch that. He starts with the super grounded, really anxious memory. He takes us right back to when he was a stressed-out high school senior. His family was going through an incredibly tough time, his parents had just separated, and right in the middle of not even knowing what kind of home he'd be coming back to, he was staring down a colossal choice about his future.
The sheer scale of this dilemma, it was absolutely massive. He had to pick between Gonzaga University, right in Spokane, Washington, so relatively close to his hometown of Seattle, or the College of William and Mary, and that is literally all the way across the country. Talk about an overwhelming choice. Does he stay close to a fracturing home, or just pack up and move completely across the country into the total unknown?
To figure this whole thing out, he decided he needed a pilgrimage of sorts, so he hops in his car and drives 500 miles completely solo across Washington state to the Gonzaga campus. He just needed to sit, pray, and try to find some kind of answer. He actually remembers driving that long, endless stretch of highway with the song Landslide playing on the radio. And man, that hit him hard, because he was actively trying to figure out how to say goodbye to his parents and the entire life he knew.
Well, when he finally gets there, he's way too anxious to actually talk to anyone at the college. Instead, he just finds this bench right by a river on campus. He sits there, watches the water, watches the birds fly by, and he prays for an answer. But the direct answer about where to go to college, it just didn't come. Instead, what he got was this bizarre, overwhelming sense of peace. He felt God's presence, a sudden, deep knowing that whatever choice he made, God was going to be right there with him.
Sitting there on that riverbank, armed with absolutely no direct answer, but this profound new sense of peace, he does something beautifully simple. He reaches into his pocket, he pulls out a quarter, and he just flips it into the air. The coin lands on heads, and boom, just like that, the decision was made. He was going to William and Mary.
As Reverend Les points out right after sharing this, it may not be a story, but it is a sermon. And this is where we pivot from a charming personal anecdote into a much deeper lesson. He uses this exact moment in his life to explain something fundamental about how we all look at our choices and, honestly, our anxieties about the future.
Which brings us to the absolute core metaphor of his message. Think about it. We spend so much time obsessing over the decisions we make, right? Fretting over how the random events of life are going to line up. But Reverend Les hits the nail on the head here. Whether the coin lands on heads or whether it lands on tails, the coin itself is still there. The random outcomes of life, they actually don't matter nearly as much as the constant presence of Christ that goes with us no matter how things shake out.
To give this a bit of a theological foundation, Reverend Les maps out the specific season of the church year he was preaching in. He explains that during the Easter season, the church progresses from the resurrection to the ascension, which is when Jesus departs to heaven, and then finally to Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit arrives. But there's a gap there. There's this kind of awkward in-between time right after the ascension, but before Pentecost. It is effectively another goodbye.
Because of this gap, the church actually chooses a reading from the Last Supper during the specific post-Easter window. Jesus is trying to prepare his friends for what happens on the other side of a goodbye. And this connects perfectly to the universal human experience of facing transitions. We all find ourselves navigating that uncomfortable, messy space between a painful goodbye and waiting for whatever is promised to arrive next.
So how exactly does Jesus answer that intense anxiety? Well, during that Last Supper, Jesus promises to send the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, to guide and comfort his disciples. This promise is absolutely crucial because it directly addresses our deepest, most primal human fear, abandonment. It's this massive reassurance that we are never, ever left orphaned or alone, especially when we're going through profound change.
I will not leave you orphaned. Reverend Les shares just how incredibly comforting this specific phrase is for him personally. He openly admits that he's someone who has carried a lifelong fear of abandonment. That's exactly what made decisions like where to go to college during his parents' separation so painfully difficult. But trusting this promise, trusting that God would actually be there while that coin was literally flying through the air, that is exactly what gave him that profound peace on the riverbank.
The big takeaway here is that God's constant presence provides a real safe harbor through all of life's crazy, unpredictable phases. We can take refuge in Him during the dark times like the shadow of the cross. We can find refuge in the joy of Easter, in the confusing limbo of the Ascension, and maybe most importantly for our day-to-day lives, in our own bittersweet goodbyes and transitions.
Reverend Les then applies this directly to the goodbyes he was facing right then in his own life. With Mother's Day coming up, he reflects on saying goodbye to his late mother, who is passed but still remains so present with him. He also talks about saying goodbye to a group of wonderful clergy friends he just spent the entire week with. As he beautifully points out, saying goodbye to a friend is hard, sure, but it's also beautiful, because you know you carry them in your heart.
But he builds this into an even deeper truth. Reverend Les reveals this incredible core takeaway about spiritual friendship. When you say goodbye to someone you share faith with, you don't just carry them in your heart. God carries both of you in God's heart. It's like a giant protective embrace. Because of that shared presence, no matter the physical distance between you, you are literally always kept together.
To wrap up this profound week with his colleagues, and really to close out the sermon itself, Reverend Les brings up his absolute favorite hymn from the Episcopal tradition. It's hymn 304. Fun fact, during his retreat, he was actually the only person who packed an instrument. As he joked, ukuleles fit a lot easier into cars than pianos do. And he actually played this specific hymn on his ukulele for their closing Eucharist.
He recites the lyrics almost like poetry. It starts out, "I come with joy to meet my Lord, forgiven, loved, and free, in awe and wonder to recall His life laid down for me." He explains how these opening lines just perfectly capture the immense awe, the wonder, and the profound joy of gathering together in communion to find that real spiritual nourishment.
The hymn continues, "As Christ breaks bread and bids us share, each proud division ends. That love that made us makes us one, and strangers now are friends." Reverend Les really emphasizes this part. Sharing this bread and sharing this faith, it actively builds a brand new community of love. It ends our divisions and totally knits us together.
And then, bringing the whole narrative full circle, the hymn finishes with, "Together met, together bound, we'll go our different ways, and as His people in the world, we'll live and speak His praise." You know, this just perfectly captures the essence of the entire sermon. We gather together so tightly to find strength and community, only to eventually say our goodbyes and scatter right back out into the world. But we do it confident that we are still bound together by that constant, unwavering presence.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. When you're standing at the riverbank of your own life and you're feeling incredibly anxious about the future, how do you navigate your own coin flips and goodbyes? Who or what serves as your constant anchor when life's quarter is just tumbling through the air? It's something absolutely worth reflecting on the next time you have to take a big leap into the unknown. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helps you find a little bit of peace in your own transitions. Catch you next time.